The documentary is called Newtown.
It's here at Sundance in the U.S. documentary competition.
I've been reading a lot of reviews of it. People are really liking it.
It's
a lot.
It's about what you would think it's about. It's about the shooting of children at Newtown.
Yes.
And at Newtown, Connecticut. And we have with us Blake Neely, Fil Eisler, and George S. Clinton. And you guys did music.
Correct.
For this documentary. And I think Gina had she kind of asked it jokingly at first, but then we started thinking about it, asked the question.
Well, how do you write music for a topic like this? I mean, we're talking about the killing of children. I don't know where you begin to start creatively writing music for that.
Well, there's a story behind how the whole sort of collective of composers came about, and it's not just us three. There's actually 17 composers on this film.
Wow.
So what happened was I wasn't actually even aware that there was a film being made, but Maria Cuomo Cole, who was a producer on this film, is a friend of mine. And I think sort of somewhere last year after, and I forget which shooting it even was, which is obviously part of the problem.
Right.
I remember calling her up and saying, okay, so I became an American citizen 2 years ago. I have a 4-year-old daughter. And I'm scared to death, of bringing her up in this country. So what do I do to get involved? I knew she was involved in a bunch of different advocacy programs for gun control.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, so I'm making a movie about Sandy Hook. To which my reaction was, oh, God.
Yeah.
Now I've put my foot in it. And the thing is, ultimately what made me decide to do the movie was my first reaction, because I realized that the public was going to have the same reaction to it, and they wouldn't want to see it.
Yeah.
The thing is, they have to see it. It's an incredibly important movie, and I'll sort of get to why that is in a minute. But what happened was, I don't remember exactly when the idea came about, but I started calling a few friends of mine. I called George and Blake, and just started throwing around the idea that maybe, because this film's about community and because it's about healing, that we as a community of composers could do something. I mean, at that point, I had no idea how that was going to happen in a practical sense, but this idea started to snowball a little bit. I thought I'd call a couple of people, and every single person had the same reaction. Their first reaction was, oh my God. And their second reaction was, how do I get involved?
Yeah, oh my God, what could we do?
Well, most people were scared of seeing the film, myself included, let alone scoring
This is a tangible way, though, of, because everybody says, I want to help. How do I help?
Right.
Well,
it's
this
what
is
we
where
do.
your talents
Well,
lie.
and 17 composers did it 17 different ways. I mean, there was one that said, I can't watch the movie. I'm just going to write something for you. There was, a few would actually write the specific scene they were writing to. I watched the movie and just wrote a piece of music and gave it to Kim, the director, and she chose where to put it.
Use it wherever you want. Huh?
Yeah, and Phil and I talked a lot about, not creatively how do you do this, but let's try not to score the tragedy of it. Let's score, the hopefulness of it. And
George, how did you talk about your involvement and what you thought about it?
Well, it's like Phil said, my first reaction was, oh my God, and then how can I help? And this is the wonderful thing about it is we feel so helpless in the face of all this.
Yeah.
We want to do something, but what can we do? The big people, the NRA and the people who control the legislation on gun control are so powerful. And then to have the opportunity to help in some way with the art that we create was just, what a wonderful opportunity. And the people around this movie, we got to hang out with Kim and, all the other people involved in it, including some of the parents. And the thing that resonates is, yes, it's tragedy, but there is this sense of hope and this sense of moving on that I think a lot of the composers picked up on and tried to put that in their music instead of tragedy.
There's a very important thing, I think, a point that was made at the screening yesterday, and as you can imagine, the premiere of the film was brutal, and every time to be in a theater full of people where every time the music stops, all you can hear is the entire room sobbing, is an incredibly powerful thing. But what was more important, and to speak to what George said a little bit, was in the Q&A afterwards, and I think it's one of the best Q&As I've ever seen at Sundance. It really was some of the best questions. Mark Barden, who is one of the fathers,
Right, yeah.
who lost a child and who's involved in the film, said, you know, I know it's very easy to look at us as broken, and we are, but I want you to look at us as beacons of hope. This is the time to go and do something. So you've made the step of seeing the film, which is something everybody's afraid of. And to speak to what George said, you know, he said, get involved however you can get involved. If you're an activist, be an activist. But if you're, we're artists, so we get to do that. And so to get the opportunity to do something through our art was, very important.
Are you? Sometimes you get into this mode when we all do it, of preaching to the choir. What we say.
Yeah.
Preaching
Are
to
the
the
right
choir.
people going to go see it?
Yeah, that's what I was
Sure.
going to ask.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, look, I think that's the beauty of this film. And it is a beautiful film, by the way. It's a beautifully crafted piece of
Well, it's
art.
getting tremendous notices. Yeah.
It is, and and rightly so. I think Kim Snyder, the director, made a beautiful film. But it's just.
How do you get the people who need to see it to see it? Yeah.
Well, look, I think there is a fear to get over, to get people to actually walk into the theater and see it. And I think that the good thing about this film is it's not a political film. It's not an advocacy movie. This is a story about grief and healing, and this is what you don't see on the news. This is a long-term cost of gun violence. This is what the news won't show because it's the kind of thing that will make people switch their TVs off, frankly.
Yeah.
But the point is, everyone really should see it, because once you've made the step of getting past your fear of seeing it, and yes, it's emotional, and yes, it's brutal, but it will change you. I would guarantee that.
But even if it just gets people talking about the movie, and
That's a
because
start.
I think a lot of the audience, especially if you watch it at home, are going to watch about 15 minutes and say, I don't want to do this anymore. But hey, they'll talk about, just getting the word Newtown back out into the,
It's a
society.
shame we have to.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
shame.
It is a crying shame.
Why,
we have to.
why all this didn't stop that
Right.
day?
I know.
How that wasn't enough.
Well,
Yeah.
again, another reason I reached out to Maria in the first place, not knowing she was making a movie, was because a lot of friends of mine who were involved in the Brady campaign, in Everytown, in all these different organizations, were kind of on the verge of giving up for that reason, saying, if we can allow a bunch of school children
Tiny
to be
little
to be
kids.
slaughtered
Yeah.
and do nothing, then the game's up.
And the good thing about this movie is we tend to, in this country, go from one tragedy of the week to the next tragedy of the week. And we say, oh, that's terrible. And then we're on to the next one. And oh, that's terrible. And suddenly we're forgetting about the one that happened 3 or 4 or last year or whenever, because we've moved on to the next tragedy. That's the way the news
Yeah, you said
cycle
Sandy
works.
Hook, and I went, oh yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's the point. And the good thing about this movie is not only is it getting people to talk about it again, but you see that the repercussions don't end with the next new tragedy. These people's lives have been affected forever, as ours should have been and are if we let it.
And within this community, it's creating generations of people who are affected by this. It's the families. This is going to affect their surviving kids and how they parent. And this goes generations down the line. And that's one community out of however many this happens in on a weekly basis.
It's called Newtown, and some of the composers are here with us, and it's done very well. And there are still times and places you can see it. It's called Newtown. Blake Neely, Fil Eisler, and George S. Clinton, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for having
Thank
us.
you.